Welcome to Moonbeaming, a podcast about magic, creativity, the tarot, lunar living, and more. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and I'm so happy you're here. Hi, welcome back. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. This is a podcast where we have conversations about magic, the archetypes, creativity, as well as the intersections between the seen and the unseen. If you've been here for a long time, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of everyone who's been here since the beginning. I am thrilled, delighted, honored, excited to bring you another really great episode today. My name is Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. I'm an artist, tarot reader, business owner. I'm an author as well. I am queer and stoked to be here. Before we begin today's show, I do have a couple of announcements. The first is around the biggest project that my studio does every year, the 2022 Many Moons Lunar Planner. It's a really magical tool. It is a hybrid grimoire, a planner, a spiritual field guide. Inside of it, it has all of the months, the weeks, the days of the year, alongside every single lunar phase, every single important major astrological event. For new and full moons, there are full rituals, prompts, spells by esteemed practitioners from all over the world and myself, yours truly. And we usually sell out every year. I'm not going to lie, the pandemic has made ordering and producing material goods harder, even though I produce everything locally. Every single thing for this planner is made about an hour away from where I live in Los Angeles. There are supply shortages that are affecting everybody. And we dealt with that. And it's really kind of made me wonder if this is going to be the last year I do this project. It's either going to be this year or next year will be the last year that I do this project. I'm telling you here first. So you're probably going to want to get it. It's a planner, quite honestly, that a lot of people have been inspired by. I'll be generous. When I started it, there was nothing out there really like this. And now there are a number of things out there like this. So it's very original. It's very unique. I created something that I needed, and I created something that I needed to see. And as of right now, we are about 70% sold out of this planner. So this is your little gentle reminder that if you buy it before December 6th, you will get a live intention setting workshop where we will cast a spell with the Many Moons Spiritual Field Guide together, and it's free. Everyone will get the replay. So this is the time to buy from our store. It will also ensure that you get this planner before the holidays, and you'll get to be part of this fantastic gathering on January 3rd, which is going to be so fun. So everyone who purchases from our store will get the invite pretty soon for that event. So look out for that. The second announcement is we've got a winner for our monthly giveaway. If you are new to the show, if you leave a 5-star review, you will be entered in a giveaway for a free tarot reading with yours truly. A stellar deal, if I do say so myself. My books are closed. I give readings here and there for my Patreon subscribers on our secret episodes. But for the most part, my books are closed to the public. So if you leave a 5-star review, you get entered. And this month's winner is Sandra Kermode. Sandra, Kermode. You left a review back in August, and you win a reading. Thank you for your lovely review. It was really sweet to read. please contact the studio so we can connect this month or next. And if you'd like to leave a review to be considered for the giveaway, it's easy. When you go to Apple Podcasts, you go to this podcast and click write a review. It takes 2 minutes. Tell us what you like about the show. Maybe tell us what your favorite episode is, what you like about the show, maybe even what you'd like us to focus on. It takes 2 seconds, promise, and that's how you get entered. This week's episode is so great. I had the honor and true pleasure of getting to interview Fariha Róisín. Fariha is a writer, a poet, a philosopher, and so much more. I got really into her work after coming across a poetry book that she wrote, How to Cure a Ghost, and then subscribed to her newsletter, which is really fantastic. Her honesty and depth is so refreshing to me. As a pretty private person, I'm always fascinated by folks who share so much of themselves publicly and also in their work freely. And I'm generally just drawn to folks like that because I'm so curious about, I guess, that impulse. I also think we will get drawn to those who have qualities we don't, you know? And so after becoming familiar with her work, I asked her to contribute to the 2022 edition of Many Moons, and she did. And now she's here on the podcast to talk about all things creative, healing, authenticity, integrity, plant medicine. We also spoke about her upcoming book, which is about wellness and the wellness industry, which, of course, you know, we all need that. We also touch upon why I hate the word woo. Please don't call me woo. You can call me for dinner. Call me almost anything, but please don't call me woo. And if you also don't identify as someone who's woo, well then, this convo is for you, my non-woo friend. Fariha Róisín brings up a topic I've been mulling over in my private life, which is around integrity. This year has been all kinds of hard for me, just like it has been for you. And some of that has been because I've been out of sorts with my spiritual practice. I am, how do I put it? The things that used to work or the things that made me feel really in alignment aren't working anymore. And I'm in this transition period of trying to figure out what is going to feel nourishing and good. And I, for some of the year, have been struggling with depression. Basically, it's been a while, and I'm fine, no worries. I wouldn't be sharing if I wasn't okay, but it's been difficult for me to reconcile this feeling with, I don't know, being mindful of the fact that I'm someone that others will go to for guidance. It's made me feel out of alignment, kind of because in my own life, I usually am someone who knows what they're doing, knows what they want to do, knows what their spiritual practice consists of, is pretty grounded, and spends quite a bit of time in spiritual practice. I mean, really, our lives are a spiritual practice, of course. I want to be really clear on that. Probably will have more episodes on that for sure because I've been unpacking it and thinking about it. But being in this territory for so long has been unfamiliar for me. And I wanted to bring this up here because I don't ever want you to think that I never get confused or sad or have rough patches. I do. You know, we're human beings. And our guest brings that up in this convo, this concept of integrity and how when we're putting ourselves out there in an authentic way, we need to feel authentic internally. It's really important, right? When she brought up that she sometimes struggles with that, it made me feel so much less alone. And I'm sharing this now with you because I don't want you to feel alone. I hope it makes you feel less alone. Honestly, these moments of confusion and sorrow and grief and being in the unknown is part of being a human. Our spiritual practices have to evolve and change, just like we do. So, inevitably, we'll find ourselves in transition zones. This is such a great conversation. It also includes a tarot reading, some messages from her helpers. So if you want to be a moth on that crystal ball convo, well, today is your lucky day. Of course, she got the moon card. Of course, she did. So we talk about that. This episode is for you if you've ever felt like an outsider, but you're still determined to live your truth. If you are someone who wants to live in integrity as much as possible, even if it makes you feel lonely, even if it's hard, but it's also non negotiable, this episode is for you. If you are a survivor of abuse and trauma, and if you're consciously looking to heal and you are healing, this episode is for you. We chat about all these things and so much more. It was truly a transformational conversation. I found myself thinking about it days afterwards, changed a little bit. I found myself nodding along the whole time, and I know you will too. I will put a content warning on this episode. There's a content warning because we talk about abuse, we talk about trauma and healing. So if you're not interested in listening to some of these themes come up, please refrain from tuning in and take care of yourself. If you're looking to explore how to tap into your creativity, intuition, how to carve your own path, figuring out how to choose yourself, here is a conversation that covers all of that and so much more. Hello, hello. Welcome to Moonbeaming. I have a very, very special guest here today that I'm sure all of you know and love as well. This person is a writer, a philosopher, an artist, a liver of life, a sharer. This is someone who is incredibly generous, very prolific, multi-talented. I came across her work several years ago with the publication of her poetry book, How to Cure a Ghost. And I was just very much impressed by her talent. And I love the book. And I'm just really, really, really excited to get into all kinds of things, art and spirituality and magic. Yeah, with our special guest, Fariha Róisín. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here.
Do you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
You did such a great job, though. This was the most magnificent introduction I've ever gotten. I get very uncomfortable when I have to tell people what I do. I'm like, I'm a writer, period. I don't know what else to say. I like the idea of being a philosopher. I'm an astrology lover. I like natural wines. I like reading a lot. I am very invested in spiritual growth and evolution. I want to tend to the land and learn from the land. I am incredibly indebted to my ancestors and the elders of this land that we live on. Yeah, I feel as though those things are so important and primary to who I am. More than like this world of this is the work I do.
Yeah, I sure do know. It makes me think of what so many people see, again, putting C in bunny ears, is just this like tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. There's like not only the other, in quote, work that we do to get to a place where we can present that iceberg tip, but also all of just the other things. Like, yeah, like I love, weird instrumental new age music from the 70s. Like, that's actually a big part of me,
Mm-hmm.
but no one would ever know that. Or I like really love dogs. Like I love my dogs and they like help me and teach me all the time, but that doesn't really enter into the chat when I'm like talking about myself. So I love that you brought up all of these priorities and practices and like what's at the forefront. So thank you. I'm sure many people can relate to that. I wanted to first start by talking about your writing. So I'm glad you said I'm a writer, because I was really struck after reading your book of poetry and encountering you as a poet first, because that's the first kind of writing of yours that I found. But then I subscribed to your newsletter, and then that's a super different form of writing. And then I also saw that you published a book of fiction. And also I saw in your bio, you're working on a book about the wellness industry. So your genre-less writing or expansiveness writing, like I found myself before this interview trying to like put descriptors on it or label it. And then I was like, hey, you're doing that thing again. You're like trying to label something. Where does that come from? Like, why are we trying to label anything that's like such an indoctrination? And then I took another step back, welcome to my brain. And from another perspective, I thought, well, in its best intentions, trying to describe something is an honoring. It is an attempt at sort of seeing. It's this investment, it's this investigation, and it can be kind of in its best like an embrace in a way, or an interaction. And so I'm just sort of curious, do you describe your writing? Like, how would you describe your writing?
Yeah, I like this idea of honoring, because I think definitely my like incapacity to talk about my work is tied to an embarrassment that I still feel about not my work, but definitely like presenting as an artist, like that kind of duality. And like, I've been thinking a lot about just how to, especially when you're making a lot of art and then you have a particular eyes on you, or like you start to see and feel how the veil's getting thinner and thinner and more people want access to you. It's like when that starts to happen, and I've seen this a lot with people who transition into their work in like in bigger realms, they're making movies and now like, they're on magazine covers and stuff. It's like there has to be such a self-awareness too, that like, in order to not get crumbled by the industry and in these industries, you have to stand so true to yourself and like sort of firm in who you are. Maybe not even true, just firm. So I like this idea of honoring yourself through like trying to attempt to describe what you do. For me, I think the way that I view my writing, and maybe this is like a thing I have battled with, because I feel I am not understood and therefore taken seriously in these like respective fields that I work in. I think the plight of being a multidimensional writer, and that's how maybe the closest, like the most, the best explainer I have for myself. Yeah. I'm a multidimensional writer. I'm not interested in form, even like something that was like it is really tricky about me, like talking about my work, even as, How to Cure a Ghost. It's a book of poetry. I don't feel like I'm a poet. I don't call myself a poet. With Like a Bird, my novel, it was interesting to see like the ways in which people interacted with it as a novel. And a lot of the commentary was that I don't follow, I guess, traditional narrative style or writing. And to me, I mean, you mentioned this yourself, like I think a lot about canon, and I think a lot about who gets to be canonized and who gets to have these platforms. And somebody who like didn't grow up with wealth or access, I think it is really radical for me to decide that I want to do everything and to be like, nobody's even opening a door necessarily for me. I'm punching down every door to let myself in, essentially. And so it's tricky. It's like, I really value and respect how hard I've had to work, but I think because it's been laborious and arduous for me as a thinker and as a person who sees like how much I've also contributed to so much different kind, like I think about even like self-care and like things that we weren't talking about, and how I feel like definitely my work has helped open these gates, and how in that process you're eliminated or dismissed or put to the side because your contribution is not considered what is important. Does that make sense? Like, it's not.
I mean, I deal with that. I deal with that so much. I'm like ready to move into a cave. You know what I mean? Like, I understand it. And I think what I hear you saying, and please, redirect, clarify, is, you do this trailblazing thing. You do this thing by following your intuition, trusting your heart, and sharing. And then what ends up happening is that people take like culture vulture, they take like what works for them within capitalism, and then you don't exist. And it could be because you're brown, it could be because you're queer, it could be because your work is inherently anti-capitalist or like inherently anti-imperialism, and they can smell it. Like they're like, oh yeah, no, we need the like washed, like scrub, like let's take the soundbite and like let's figure out how we can put it in an article about bathing so that we can sell the bath bomb or whatever. And listen, I love bath bombs. Like, I'm not adverse to any of them, but I do think that this will happen a lot with people. I call it like I was born under the dark moon. So I like call it a dark moon baby issue where like whenever you're steps ahead, you are ahead of the curve. And that can feel really lonely. It can feel like we're just humans who want to be acknowledged, and who want to get our citations, or who just want someone to be like, oh yeah, I read it in this place, or this person introduced me to that, which is very anti-capitalist, right? It's like acknowledging your sources, your elders, like lineage, all of that stuff. And so when I'm saying I like understand, I just feel for me, it's like, it's very bizarre to see practices that you've had that meant the world to you, like sold back to yourself, like bottled up by other people or, a corporation or whatever, and then like sold back to you. And you're like, is this like, there's that meme of like the guy with the butterfly and he's all, is this magic? Is this spirituality? Like it can feel isolating. It can feel exhausting. I think that's just something that I really honestly believe that that's something that a lot of intuitive people, a lot of people who are interested in the truth have to contend with, no matter what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that a lot of, creative renegades and people that are like maybe also spiritually attuned in that sense as well, we come against this extraction of our work, which is something I feel all the time. I feel so extracted from, and then again, dismissed at the same time, which is such a product of capitalism. And so I think it's funny because my fourth book, which you mentioned, is my first book of nonfiction called Who Is Wellness For? And it is about the wellness industrial complex. And I'm writing it right now. And I'm in the process of finishing it. It's coming out next year. So it's pretty scary and overwhelming to think that, like, in a lot of ways, I feel like the last couple of years have been bringing me to this moment. And within the book, it's all about looking at white supremacy and unpacking kind of the ways in which it's in the insidious ways in which it's had us all by our necks, and how, it makes us compliant and all of those things. And then looking at that sort of like on a more macro level with like focusing on the wellness industrial complex and the wellness industry, and how what you're saying about like the extraction of something and then it being sold back to you, the extraction of your culture and then it's sold back to you and you're like, wait, what? Which I think is like in terms of wellness, being a South Asian person, being a Bangladeshi person, like seeing how like, you know, even just like farming in India early this year, last year and this year, you know, everything with the protests, you know, happening with Indian farmers, and how caste and class are such important parts of cultures, like, you know, obviously Vedic culture, but like practices like yoga, like meditation. I mean, these things are not devoid of the cultural context that they come from. And so I think that like you see it on a macro level, and then I see it on a micro level as well. So I'm trying to like talk about all of it and intertwining all of it. It's a lot, because obviously that happens to me on a day-to-day basis as a queer Bangladeshi Muslim person, like all of the ways in which like that's dismissed and distilled and confused, and abstracted, you know, like I don't feel like anyone knows who I am or tries to understand like what does it mean to be all of those things, live in America where I'm an immigrant and I don't live in this country, but I'm a settler. And like that, like all of these like different dynamics of existing. And I think a lot of that is why we are where we are right now, because we have just been so in this realm of mass confusion because of white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism, being told that this is the way things are. This is the way it's always been, even though it's only existed for a couple of 100 years. So what? Capitalism, we act like capitalism is the be all end all, and it's like it's 100 years old.
Yes.
Do you know how collapsible this shit is? You know how empires collapse all the time, and historically we can see and track that. And so I think that's why people like you and me like can believe in revolution, because it's like it can materialize so fast to me. Like it isn't in the distant future. It is so close, but it's about also acknowledging what it takes to get there. And I think that kind of comes back to what we were saying earlier about, you know, like you have to know who you are. You have to move in order to move with integrity. You have to first have that integrity in the first place.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, some people don't have that, you know, so it's a little bit I mean, yes, everything you're saying is resonant, and I can relate in my own way. Obviously, I have no idea what your experience is. I'm a queer Jewish lady, middle-aged, middle-class, white lady. But I also I can relate. Let's just put it that way. And I also am like, there's that quote, I believe it's Mark Fisher, where it's like, we can more easily imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
Right.
And like you said, I'm like, wait a minute. It wasn't like 250, 300 years ago, like pre-industrial revolution, that there were much different forms of economies, you know, and across the globe, yes, capitalism is the dominant economic system, but even in little pockets or like in different places, there are different forms of exchanges. So it's just kind of, and like with the colonization piece is so much about, I was actually just talking about this with my friend today, so I guess I'll bring it up here. You know, we were talking about how like ripping away folks from spirituality, from their own specific forms of spirituality, because we were talking about how I am not a theologian. I'm not an expert. Please, nobody, you know, think I'm saying I know what I'm talking about exactly. But, and I have to do some Googling on this as well, because her and I were talking about religion. And I was like, wait, is Christianity the only non-land, non-ethnic based religion? Like, you know what I mean? Because even Judaism, I don't know anything about Islam in terms of land-based practice, but I'm assuming there is because of the moon and the circular holidays, and you know that I'm sure is in part attached or woven together with some kind of land-based acknowledgement. But you know, because like even Judaism is a land-based practice. Everything we do, all of our holidays are around land and around seasons and around honoring different crops and all of that. So I'm just sort of like, is that like Christianity was like sort of, was that why it spread so easily? Because it could be, and also of course the that when you take the land out of the equation, what you have is disembodiment. What you have is a promise of ascension or an afterlife that is also racked with trauma and pain and fear and being afraid that you're going to be, in quote, bad and you won't be able to, so I just I'm thinking about all of that. I'm thinking about how it lives in all of us in different degrees, depending on, who we are and where we came from and so on and so forth. And about how we actually can't put language in a way to the atrocity of it. We can't actually. And also I see this as a time where we're having conversations about these things where, I'm quite a bit older than you. I'm 40. And when I was your age, there was barely anyone talking about, there were people, but it's reached a point where it's much more, it's becoming much more available to us to have conversations like this and to have uncomfortable conversations,
Yeah, I love that we're going here because to me, this is a lot of it. This is what I'm dealing with in my book. And, even just thinking about the Anthropocene and thinking about how that to me started with colonization. And so the nihilism of the time, even the Mark Fisher quote that you shared, that is to me a realization that people would much rather expect the end of the world than to change. To them, change is so, it's so wrapped up in also righteousness and entitlement to I deserve to be like this. And I think that is such a product of white supremacy. It's I deserve to take this land. I deserve to kill these people. I deserve to genocide millions of people across the globe for generations at a time. That kind of reckoning, and it's such a large scale reckoning that has continued into the 21st century. And we rarely think about imperialism in that sense, but imperialism exists till now. What is Afghanistan and Iraq and, all of these portals of American imperialism. But I think that what is exciting and what is an anecdote to that for me, and maybe why I consider myself an abolitionist, or at least try to believe in abolition as much as I can, is that we have to have hope. We have to believe that there's a tipping point happening. And I think the work that you and I do is really a reminder of, okay, things are really difficult, but they have to be in order to have the planetary global reckoning that we need to have. And so everything's kind of engineering that right now.
And that it's possible, even though we're always going to be compromised, we'll always be compromised by the systems that we're in, right? There's never a right way or a wrong way. There's never, no one's ever going to be better at evading capital. There's no, any spiritual person will tell you there's no such thing as winning. No one's winning here. We're all dying. There is the time period between we are born and then we die. And hopefully we can live a life that reflects our values, that offers up space for us to express our gifts, share our spirit, do some healing, pass on more healing than pain, and so on and so forth. But I do think it's important to think about integrity and however one defines it, and to sort of model to the best of one's ability what integrity can look like. I've had to think about this all the time, and I'm sure you do as well. Integrity, living in integrity often is not sexy. It is not cute. It's not going to make you any friends. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's important to try to bring our ideals as much as possible into our behaviors, into our actions, into what we do, so that we can show, I can show other people, hey, I do not want to sound like I'm virtue signaling at all. This is just the first thing that came to my mind. Hey, I give away 5 to 10% of my earnings to these organizations and grassroots causes because it's possible. I didn't collapse. I can feed myself. I'm okay. As white people, we need to learn how to be comfortable with giving things away, all of that. I absolutely believe in reparations and land back as well. So it's I can, at least in tiny little ways, be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Nothing fell apart. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I actually feel much more integrity and much more embodied doing things like that. Like, what do you think? Like, because I think also as a white person, you're very, very much trained, I think, at least, to hoard, you know? And hoarding actually isn't abundance. Hoarding is scarcity, you know? So it's like thinking about all of those things. So I'm glad you're writing this book. I'm glad it's probably going to be the first book of its kind, no?
Yeah, I know. It's huge. It's really, really huge, and it's really, really exciting, and it's really, really overwhelming, and all of those things. But, I love this point about hoarding too, because I think that if we were to see how vital it is for us to give land back, to pay reparations, and, I'm sure Judaism has a similar component, but in Islam, part of the 5 pillars of being Muslim, one of them is zakat, and it's giving you 2.5% of your income. And of course, like, there's so many Muslims that do not do that. But, to me, it's such a good reminder of, like, this is what you have to do as a person, as a person in your community, in your society, to be invested in the health and well-being of everybody. And that, I think, is like the most concerning thing about writing this book. It's like, how can anybody be well when our community is not well? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense. And that's why, like, I think anyone who has a practice of spirituality and they're like, again, like, known publicly as having spirituality be part of their practice, which I also find like absolutely ridiculous, in the sense of like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you be spiritual? Why does it have to be this weird woo-woo thing? It's literally our birthright. It's literally like how we connect with the world. Everything is alive. Everything has a spirit. I'm looking around at the trees and the clouds. Why wouldn't I be in relationship with these like living, breathing elements and plants? And like, why do we have to denigrate it to like woo woo? I hate that word. I hate it
Me too.
so much, where I'm like, oh, so when you tell me I'm woo woo, you're telling me that my entire cosmology is like wacky, when really, if you ask me, like, your cosmology is really harmful. So I'm not really like, I'm like, my cosmology, that everything is alive. We all are in relationship with one another. Abundance is our birthright. Beauty is everywhere. We are animals, so we are also to think about living seasonally, and like, we go through cycles just as nature does. Death is natural, compost is natural, decay is natural. Why is that insane? Like, why is that worldview insane? Like, we've been so severed from nature, that we like forget about that.
I feel you so hard. The last person I was dating was always calling me woo woo. And I honestly, it was just last year too. And she would always call me woo woo. And it was so, one, it felt really dismissive at the time. And I couldn't even explain that to her. I was just like, this doesn't feel good to me. And now I've like started to just like unpack and think about how that in itself is a way that colonial mentality has seeped into the fabric of how we relate to one another. That science, and the idea that science and spirituality don't mix, it's such colonial bullshit. It's like, okay, there's so many cosmologies. Islam is a perfect example of like science and medicine, and everything was a part of the way that Islam was packaged. It was a universal philosophical identity. It wasn't the stricture that we experience and see it now. That it's not true to what it is as a spiritual vessel. And it's frustrating that, people like you and I get, I think, denigrated is a great word, and put to the side. And also the ways in which that, I think, for me as a very naturally spiritually precocious person, like, I've always kind of been close to God, and I've always felt very close to spirit, and how connecting to the land through medicines, or just being one with them and developing a relationship to trees even, has helped me understand God on such a deep and universal level. And it is so sad that that's how they got us. They made sure that we doubted that very kernel of truth that we have. Again, this truth that we have and we're born with, we're forced to forget and lose and believe and mistrust and disbelieve this thing that we have, this power that's so innate in every single human. And we're forced to rely on the news and capitalism and, like unrealistic relationships and harmful relationships because we can't expect more or better. It's sad.
It is sad. And I'm grateful for people like you who are reflecting back other ways to be, and more spiritual and more ethical and more authentic, truthful ways to show up. You said trees, so I'm gonna make a segue to, you wrote this gorgeous piece for the 2022 Many Moons Planner that everyone's gonna love so much. Is it okay if I read a little bit from it and then we can talk about it? With this full moon, I prepare for my own birth, a rebirth of the person I know myself to be, buried beneath tumult. I do that by coming back to my body, something that I was never taught to do. I wasn't raised with the understanding that I could be in my body, that I could be safe there. As an adult, I see how that lack of safety in my formative years shaped my dissonance with myself. It was hard for me to like who I was. It was hard to feel proud or loyal to myself. I felt as if I had no compass and that I was floating, edging always toward an eternity of loneliness. A lot of my life was shrouded in loneliness with both myself and others, until I began to ask myself what kind of life I wanted. Did I want to be happy, like truly happy? Or did I want to be lost in confusion about who I was, uncomfortable to take and stand in my own power? This came with the realization that I had spent my life being small, playing small, and constricting myself to be something that I assumed would be palatable, beloved by others. I thought that's what brought others care and loyalty. But dismissing myself for others was not feeding me. I had to learn to root in myself for myself. Gorgeous. I think many, many people will be listening to this and nodding. Like, I think it's really highly relatable. And I wanted to ask you, how did you learn to root in yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, a little bit, I guess, context about who I am and where I come from. I was raised in Australia. That's a very prominent and important part of my identity because nature in Australia is of another world. It fed me, it brought me so much sacred relationship that I couldn't have had otherwise, because I grew up in a lot of abuse. My mom is very unwell and is a very dangerous person, unfortunately. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a lot of the work I have to do. And I'm also a survivor of incest. And I think it says everything about me, about what I've had to unlearn on such a, core level. And that, I think, like, when you grow up in abuse, and of course we use that word now so like openly, which is fine, but like, it does then get confusing when you're talking about abuse and people don't really know what you're talking about. So for me, it's important to name these things. My mom is incredibly violent, and almost every day of my life until I was 19 was horrifying. And so that, I think now finally, like being able to come back to my own nervous system, understanding what is mine and what is somebody else's, had to be foundationally created. And I could not have done that without the help of ayahuasca. And for me, that medicine has been one of the most extraordinary experiences and relationships I've ever been given, because she's known as grandmother. That's how Indigenous folks, talk about her. She's called grandmother, and she has such healing qualities, but she also comes into your being and sees everything and is such a seer and such a light, and then just moves and sheds and allows you to come to yourself and to be able to breathe in your own skin again. And I think that as somebody who was violated at such an early part of my life, my understanding and awareness of myself was so broken and shattered. And not only that, I was also like a vehicle for my mother's safety and healing. So I was doing two things at once all the time. And I think that a lot of the reason that people maybe look at me and don't expect this kind of trauma, which is very frustrating, is because I was from a very young age taught how to carry both and carry a lot and carry multiple things at the same time. So my body became sort of like, I see it in that when I watched Donnie Darko for the first time, it was such a visceral feeling of like when Donnie has like this like portal in his stomach, and I was just like, that's what my mom does to me. That's what Amu does to me. Like she just was like, she had this like way of just gathering energy, and I just was everything to her. And so my healing journey started when I was 19, even though I didn't know that. I escaped. I left Australia, and then I've been in America and Canada for 12 years. And a lot of my 20s, sort of the first half to mid 20s, I was very lost and very self-destructive and incredibly violent with myself. And then it was a choice that I made at 25 after a suicide attempt. I realized I didn't want to die. I didn't want to also sacrifice. I'm not sacrificial in that way. Like this is my body and this is my life, and I get to choose what I do with my body and my life.
Feels very like Ten of Swords, actually, now that I'm listening. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ten of Swords, I really identify with that card, sadly. Like I think a lot of my pain in life is wondering why my life is so hard. Why am I being tested on such, like also fundamental levels? Not having a mother is incredibly painful. Having a mother that fails you is incredibly painful at such a, again, like, in such foundational ways. It's very, very, very painful. But choosing, that was the moment of self-care for me. Choosing self-care, as corny as that sounds, was recognizing that I could become and embody the person that I need to be in this lifetime, because I get so many messages that tell me, whether it's from my guides or my ancestors, that I'm going to a particular place of sort of universal healing, and I can only do that if I'm doing it for myself. And I think that the rootedness and being able to root has come from an awareness that people will continue to take. People will continue to hurt you and not understand you and extract. And all you can do is know who you are in that process and root so deeply and firmly into the earth and into the ground. And it was really like earlier this year, I did a ceremony with grandmother, and with all women, which was so profound. And there was this moment where I was sometimes during the medicine and during ceremony, it becomes very visceral for me that I carry sexual trauma in my body and this lineage of sexual trauma in my body. And during this particular ceremony, I couldn't handle how much the experience of it. So I went outside, and it was raining. This was in February. It was raining, and I was on the earth and there was somebody with me who was helping me, guiding me. And I had done a shamanic practice before where I move the energy through my body and down through my tailbone and send it to the earth. But I had never done it on my own. And I was in this process of being like, okay, I have to do this on my own because it wants to go into the earth. And I couldn't believe it, but I did it. I processed the energy and moved it down my spine to my tailbone and sent it to the earth. And I started crying. And as soon as I did that, it started hailing. And it was fucking insane just to experience that with her, with, like with the earth. And I was on, Miwok land, and I was like on the land, like just the grace that Mother Earth shows you and how much she can hold for us is phenomenal, is such a gift, because in that moment, as much as I could see the correlation between her and me, she gives me so much wisdom in showing how much she can expand. No matter how much she's holding, she can continue to hold more. And that's the grace that I want to embody.
Wow. That's an epic sharing. Thank you so much. It's so amazing. Wow. Yeah. I'm like in the rain, in the hail. I'm like, beautiful. I have one last question for you. It's also from your Many Moons piece. I'm going to read a little, and then the question is at the end. As I step more into myself and more into my body with distinction and remembrance, I also begin to see myself merge with the world, with nature, with Mother Earth and the tendrils of the universe. I honor my body, my spirit, and call for romance as I speak to the trees in whispers. I ask for love, affection, recognition from myself and from the trees, and feel inspired and touched by her lush green soul, of the soil that sits beneath me, of the branches that pulsate from the depths of roots, reaching towards grandfather sky and creator. There is beauty beyond objects. There is humility in knowing we are all connected and loved eternally. And then the question you ask for us in your piece that I'm going to ask you is, what is one truth you live by? How does this define you as a person?
My name means joy in Arabic. Fariha means joy. And, as a kid, I was famously always laughing, which is so ironic now that I think about, come to terms with who you are. But I think that, like, I have the bravery that shows, like, that honest pursuit of joy. Maybe that's a truth I live by. And as I get older, it clarifies even more because, I've mentioned truth so many times in this podcast, and I'm not even saying that I'm particularly good at it. I'm just saying that I'm trying all the time, and that's a pursuit that I definitely follow and hold dear to my heart. And that's something I stand by and live by.
So I'm excited to give you this reading. As listeners know, as my clients know, I'm a psychic and a tarot reader, and oftentimes there are pretty clear messages that want to come through for someone without the cards. And you are one of those people where there was a bunch of messages. Whoever is surrounding you loves you very, very much. You have a team for sure. I'm sure you can feel them. And they're really, the first thing, they're both excited and they're proud of you. Like that was very much the energy and the vibe. Like they also wanted to be clear for me to deliver that because it feels like you're in a time where you may not have the external validation that you are like blooming, you know, like that you are just doing really well. You've come a long way, they're saying. And they're kind of laughing, like they're kind of funny. Like I don't know if you yourself have a cheeky energy to you. Like, you know, there's like a kind of like haha, you know, but dark humor sort of vibe. That's what I'm getting. I don't know if that's you. Or like, you know, how your guides like talk to you in the language you can understand. The big thing they wanted to talk about with you, they also were really clear to tell me that it might activate you a little bit, because it's sort of what you're working on right now. And the first theme is home. It's around like home and belonging. And this is like metaphoric and literal. It's spiritual, emotional, metaphoric, and literal. And there seems to be a connection between where you're going to be living for the next, it's showing like a short period of time. They're not showing me like this is your next lily pad forever, but they are showing me that you really, really, above all, need a place to exhale and need a place to relax. And it's they're showing me that it's the suggestion is wherever you were, for wherever like was your home for your body last, you're not going back there. You might go back there later, but you're going somewhere else. And they're sort of showing me that you're going to root down in a place that previously you would not have thought of. But it's about how it feels, it's about ease. They're showing me also that, like, really all you need to have in this new place are a couple or a handful of really good friends, you know, like family kind of friends. And they're also suggesting that following your intuition and sort of just putting feelers out, like for the abode, if it's easy and if the place is quite lovely, like that's sort of all you need for a go. Like that can be your green light. It's not necessarily about the geographic location right now. It's more about what you need to recover, space, time, something that is financially more accessible for you right now as well, so that you can kind of focus on other things other than just like hustling, hustling, going, going, going. The other thing they're really clear about for you, and again, please use your own intuition and discretion, and discernment, but they were very specific. This was the very specific piece, and it's about having your walls all be your own, meaning like the place you're going to move into for the next longer period of your life isn't supposed to like share walls with anyone else
Mhm.
in terms of like an apartment. And then they were like cheeky again, and they're like, it's okay if it's a duplex and like she's on the top floor. Like they're like,
Mm.
that's cool. Don't like, they're like, she's gonna get literal. So like, but it just so long as you feel a sense of privacy and a sense of feeling like your energy can stretch out into a space. You can be naked, both literally, spiritually, and energetically, because they're showing me you haven't felt like that for like a very, very long time. If ever, like you've had pockets of it, but like it's been a minute. And so then the next thing they're sharing with me is it's really, 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 really a great opportunity now for you to tap into doing energetic hygiene and energetic work. What I'm sort of seeing with your energy is that you on you, like your energy, that's just your energy, is awesome. It's amazing. It's great. It's solid. It's like dense, grounded, like meaning you. You know who you are. You know how you feel like yourself. What happens that I'm sort of sensing is the feelers. So you have this like very strong energy field that's yours. And then when you're like having to go out in public or having to deal with people, even on phone or text or whatever, you get these sensors that almost look like little roots, like little nerves all around you. And they are highly, highly sensitive, and they need to be guarded because they're burnt out. Like they're like looking, feeling, and they're just tired. Like they're tired of having to kind of sense and feel and like discern and all of that stuff. And so I'm almost wondering if like having a really beautiful energetic grounding and protection process practice, they're also telling me that there's something within your tradition, there's something within your ancestry, your religion, something that you feel very tethered to spiritually that has a specific energetic practice or exercise that you can connect to that can help you with this, because it's sort of like there's all these like sensors going out and they get really overwhelmed, and you're sort of like, but why am I tired? Because like I'm good, like I know how I feel, and it's because it's sort of this it's a protection device for sure, and that's really beautiful, and also it needs to rest. And so this is the last piece that they want to tell you, because like they're like, this is enough. Okay. uh they also have good boundaries, and that probably means you do as well. They're showing me that what this is about too, what the leap is, they're saying to me, is to relax, to find the relaxation, to find the space first on a core cellular level, on a literal level in terms of where you end up rooting down for the next while, and then the abundance will come. So it's sort of like reverse engineering a new way of being in terms of your energetic output. And that it's the underlying kind of foundation of this process is trust. You know, trusting that what your intuition is telling you is correct, trusting that there can be a different way, trusting that you can embody what you most value and it can nourish you instead of create an obstacle or a conflict, because that's also something that you're unraveling on the mental level. Like you're like, okay, well, I think this and I know this,
Mm.
but when I try to embody it, there's sort of some kind of conflict or some kind of betrayal or some kind of heartbreak. And they're reminding you that this is just one moment and that we don't have to attach to past material attempts, because you are a completely different person now who has learned lessons in a really profound way. And there's this great encouragement for you to really like lean into this trust, lean into this feeling of home, lean into this these ideals and these values that you know, like in your heart. Does this
Mm.
all make sense?
Mhm.
Do you want me to pull a card or two about something?
Yeah. Well, I think the way that I really enjoy readings and also the way that I feel about you is that I'm sort of an open vessel and really just want to go with the flow with you, and I'm really happy for you to lead in any way that feels good for you. Um, yeah, I'm really just honored to be here and share this
Aw.
space.
Aw.
Yeah.
Likewise, of course. Your guides, your ancestors, your helpers, they're very beautiful. They love you very much. They're very wise. They're very smart. They're very funny. They're really proud and really happy for you. Why don't we pull a couple cards that can kind of contextualize this transition? How does that feel?
Yeah, and then I feel like questions will also emerge as we move.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, baby. You got some good cards. I mean, they're all good cards. So I pulled four because I sort of was thinking of like a support system, like the four corners or just like the four walls. So
I
maybe it's
love
like
that.
the four walls of reminders, reframing context that you can meditate on in your own practice or take what works for you and leave the rest. So the first card that got pulled, you got 10 of swords.
Hmm.
So this is for me. So for me personally, my interpretation of the swords are about ending unnecessary suffering.
Hmm.
And as you know, the tens are about the end of unnecessary suffering. When tens come you know that you're in this transition that is profound and that you won't be coming back to. You know, like this is like you're ending some sort of chapter in your life. And it looks like with the swords, it looks like it's stuff around writing, stories, narratives, nervous system, beliefs, the way you think of yourself, you know, very literally no longer turning the swords inwards, you
Mm,
know? I think about that energy that they were telling me about. That's like you have this like energetic sort of like, hey, what's like, it's almost like an energetic hypervigilance that can kick in to protect you that is like needs to be relaxed, you know, like needs to just
mm,
sink into the trust. And so I think that it's this very beautiful reframing of what is leaving your world now, what you are leaving, because I think it's both and to be able to understand that grief is a part of the process, that there's feelings of finality that is part of the process, and that you're, it seems, it appears as though you are very literally both rewiring certain pathways in your brain and also making, you're like rewriting yourself right now. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So there's that. But what is the Ten of, because this was the only sort of traditionally gnarly card that you got. What do
Hmm.
you think of with this card? Because I know you're very familiar with the tarot.
I think I feel the same way that the ending, how I always read it, but it's such a violent card. Like whenever I look at it, I have the Rider Waite deck for traditional tarot, and yeah, looking at the Ten of Swords and just that imagery of like the person on the back on their stomach and their backs, their back just lined with swords. It's very visceral, but it feels accurate for the first card because I think that for me, I have also been focusing a lot on ending cycles, and this is my eighth perfection year. So it's like a year of death, and lots of rebirth, and like
Mhm.
even just taxes. It's so funny, like how like your year just becomes like it because like I paid off so much debt this year, like loans that I had, just like
Awesome.
randomly,
Yes.
not even thinking about it.
Yes. That have been draining your energy,
Exactly. And
you
also,
know?
yeah, and like relationships that I think unfortunately became dishonest, and like ending those cycles, and then like money attached to those relationships. It's just a really fascinating process of getting all this information and then like applying it and integrating it into your life and then seeing how everything lines up. It's really cool.
It's very cool. And I also like, you know, one last little note on this Ten of Swords in kind of an energetic and magical way is it's so much about cord cutting. You
Mm.
know, it's so much about saying like, hey, I'm like, this is my energy. You know, I'm not giving it away in the same ways. We're not doing this again. Like, I'm sorry that you
Mm.
feel this way, but this is not going to keep going on. And we're
Yeah.
cutting these cords. Also, cutting cords. I also think that also just cutting cords and or integrating just past life stuff. And I mean past life in all the ways,
Hmm.
right? Like who you were a year ago,
Hmm.
maybe who you were three lifetimes ago,
Hmm.
and just sort of understanding that we want to attach ourselves as a form of protection and a form and a way to like situate ourselves and ways to stay safe, but there comes a certain point where I love that you said truth because we have to come to the truth of the matter. I feel like our world has really set us up to gaslight ourselves. And so sometimes I can see this card as like, no, this isn't happening anymore. I'm not sacrificing myself for
Yeah.
someone else's truth or for society's truth. Like I'm cutting that
Mm.
foundational cord. The
Mm.
next card that you got that is gorgeous is you got the moon.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, you're in this unfolding mystery. Like you're in the not knowing, you're in the going deeper and deeper. I love thinking about the moon in relation to the sun, you know, the card that comes right after it, because it's sort of like in order for us to shine so brightly, we need to go down really deep, you know? And I think so much of the moon as being about those parts of ourselves that are so innate, so wild, so intuitive, um, so vulnerable, getting a chance to be seen, heard, acknowledged, shared, accepted, and also just uh, for me, the moon is just this card about a more feminine kind of magic,
Mm,
uh, feminine power, you know, that is mysterious, trusting that unseen, trusting your magic, trusting the rituals, trusting certain practices that you have, like leaning into those as your anchor, because it's so much also for me a card about doing away with linear time, you
mm-hmm,
know?
mm-hmm.
It also makes me think of with this looking at this 10 of swords and the other cards I'm gonna show you, in a moment, also really getting, really making sure that your inside matches your outside and your outside matches your inside, and that what you're reflecting is very accurate to
Mm,
your heart and soul, to your energy field. Do you know what I mean?
mm-hmm. That's been so much of the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years. It's funny that you say it like that as well. Um, Something of primary concern for me, maybe the last 3 years, sort of like I'm 31. I'm just came out of my Saturn returns, came out of Capricorn. It's obviously still very much in it, but I feel like the process for me was accepting that I am not always who I say I am, and that bothers me. And I have to start looking at those things and start facing that, especially as a public person. And I'm sure you feel this way too. Similarly, it's like I think publicness and sort of making public art and public work for me is takes so much self diligence and so much internal. I mean, especially to do it right, doing it in a way, especially now, the resources that we have, the ability that we have to know ourselves at such a core and fundamental level, for me has meant that I don't want to play the game like other people. I'm not here to win in capitalism. I'm here to really root into this earth and heal it, and thereby heal me and my ancestry and everyone that is in this process with me. But that means that that internal reckoning is so deep, and it's just been so overwhelming to like consistently feel like, okay, I have to remain on this path no matter what happens, no matter like what kind of ego comes into the game. I have to remind myself that that is the journey of being true, of being um, honest, and reflecting an honest portrayal of oneself, and then acknowledging when there's things you want to work on or things that are messy about you. I'm also trying to accept the mess now too. And
Yeah.
the moon card is like a really funny one because I hate that card because I'm like, no clarity, Jesus Christ. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want the illusion, I want the truth. But
Mhm.
the thing is, like, sometimes you need that murkiness. Like, that's what's so beautiful about the card, like the moon. And it has a Black Panther on it too, right? And so the deck, use two decks every morning. Yeah. I use the Rider Waite, and then I use the animal cards. I use medicine cards. And Black Panther in the medicine card deck is embracing the unknown. And so they correlate with one another, which I thought was really cool. But I mean, there's so much beauty in surrendering, and yet maybe it's because I'm a Capricorn. I like just need to know everything all the time.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that when we're in the moon, the energy of the moon, I mean, I could talk about this forever, so I'm going to try to make it really little. I mean, I agree with absolutely everything you said, and I hope we can get into more of it later. But I also think about, well, in the unknown, if time isn't linear, if we know we can heal our future self, heal our past self, heal our ancestors, child selves, if we know healing goes both ways, if we know that we are not only headed towards the future, but the future is also headed towards us, and that there are all these little futures that we can like flag down dependent on what path we're on right now or what we need right now. I feel like the moon card can ask us, okay, in the unknown, what do we need to know? Like just for now, what practices do we need to
Mm,
trust? You know,
mhm.
is it tarot? Is it breathing? Is it writing? Is it art? Is it magic? Is it sex? Is it whatever it is? Like, what practices bring us home, bring us back to ourselves in the sea of the unknown, which, as you know, we're always in. We just forget we are sometimes. But that's a really amazing card, I think. I mean, I love this card. I know it generally in traditional tarot gets a bad rep, but I think that's because of misogyny. Um, the next card you got lovers.
Oh,
Yeah. So like this is really we're getting like even more beautiful. Like I love that we're like starting at the hard part.
yeah,
So it's like we're
totally.
starting at the rough and
Mhm.
tough of the 10 of swords. Um and then we're moving into this like untethered sort of sea of possibility and recentering
Mm,
with the moon. And now we're like here, we're like on land. We are dialoguing, we're engaging, we are connecting, we are weaving, you know, with these larger things. And so I also wonder if like this is going to be a really awesome time for you in terms of receiving more accurate reflections of yourself, you know? Like if you're doing this lunar work, then of course it makes sense that the lovers would step up. And also, I'm really wondering what is going to be on the horizon from now until like the next solstice in terms of like what new art forms are you pulling in? What new dialogues are you interested in having? What different energetic collaborations do
mm,
you want to kind of bring forth? Because I always like the lovers is like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 3. So it's also this like really beautiful manifestation card born out of new dialogues, you know?
mm,
I also think a lot of around, for me, the biggest interpretive word that comes with lovers is relationship. And not just relationship to other people, but like quality of relationship, whether it's to the sky, to our art, to like the greater collective. What does the quality of our relationship look like and feel like? What energy are we bringing to it? What practices support that? What is the proof of that? Because you spoke about like after we do the unknown or the centering work in the moon, then we can get to the lovers where we're like, okay, well, I know what works for me. I know what feels really good for me. I'm now ready to bring this forth in a different way. So I feel
mhm,
like there's going to be this like flurry of activity happening in like 2022 for you around
mm,
a deeper quality of relationship, different kinds of stories being told. Now that you've cut ties with old stories, there's like more space for new forms of story, whether it's like a different form of writing or, you know, like you always write poems and now you're going to go write historical fan fiction or like just something sort of different, I think, coming up. And also a different expression of your creativity, you know, like that's like burgeoning and ready to kind of flow. Last but not least, the card you got as a contextualization of this time for you, what you're headed towards, what is supporting you, what energies and archetypes wish to reach out their hands to you. You got the Nine of Pentacles.
hmm.
It's in the traditional Rider-Waite Coleman Smith. It's
It's
the
very
woman
good.
in yeah, I call it the good life card. Like, you know,
Mm,
she's in a
mhm.
winery. She has like a falcon she's been training. She's in this like amazing like
Gown.
that looks like out of like a Gustav Klimt
Yeah,
painting, and she's
totally.
like in this silk muumuu, you know, like enjoying the fruits of her labors. Like we know that Nine of Pentacles is about ripeness, is about growth, is about enjoying what it is we're kind of putting forth. And so I just kind of wonder if like in all this clearing space, doing all this lunar work, stepping into lovers, is that going to help you enjoy what you're doing more and be able to celebrate what you're doing more in the moment, so you don't have to climb up a mountain
Totally.
to feel like, oh, I did it. Like
Totally.
pat on the back where you're like, oh, I wrote 3 sentences. Like she's feeling good. Or just infusing, acknowledging. Also, like they're okay, your guides are coming back in. They're like, she needs to remember again and again and again how far she's come, and let that not be a albatross around her neck, but let that be a constant reminder that she is allowed to transform and she is allowed to expand far beyond what she even thinks is possible for her now. They want to like come back in to remind you of that with this card, where it's like you're allowed, with this card. You're allowed to enjoy, you're allowed to just celebrate, you're allowed to architect a life of like ease and grace. The other thing I like about this card, I don't love the traditional Golden Dawn astrological associations with the cards. Again, a conversation for another day. But this card I do love. It's Venus and Virgo. So it
Hmm.
makes me think of like to me, Virgo is very much tied to the moon. Virgo actually used to be an archetype that was associated with the moon because like this archetype is that of the tender of the temple, right? So I also think of this like beautiful Virgo energy of belonging to self and also being of service, which is very lovers to me, right? You're like, I belong to myself first. I do this for myself. Once I have the full cup, I'm of service. That is
Mm.
like one of my
Hmm.
values. And I
Hmm.
think that like Nine of Pentacles, I'm getting chills right now because it reminds me that you can be both and. You can have enough space for yourself, your desires, your dreams, your comfort, whatever luxury looks like. And you're also allowed to be of service. You're allowed to like eat fruit and do like really hard work for the collective. Like it all can exist however you decide to structure what's going on.
Hmm.
So I also think about like this transition is this like beautiful reconfiguring of like which parts of you are allowed to take up space, which parts of you which values are allowed to be prioritized. And that was, I think, sort of the cosmic tug from whatever guides of yours step through, which is of like, she can relax first. Like, it's not just like, oh, I have to go, 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 go. And then I can relax once I'm like totally exhausted or once the check has been cleared. How can you bring what you need more into your body, more into your everyday, more into your energetic field so that you are in this sort of Nine of Pentacles energy more and more? It just like can build on each other and it's not dependent on the check being cleared, the good email, the bad email, but this like there's like how can you define what success is and how can you allow yourself to receive abundance and relaxation and beauty, all of the things that you shine out for other people,
Mm.
how can you let that sink into
Mm.
your life, your cells, your structure, your schedules, like on a very profound, nourishing level? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. How do I do that? How do I find that? It's very much where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I really totally I think we're all with you. Like I think after this last I always say 2 years and then I'm like, well actually like after this last like 2000 years, like we're all trying to figure it out. So I hope this was really helpful for you and it
Thank
was
you.
such a pleasure to hold space for you and your guides. I'm releasing any and all energy from them, any and all connection from them. Both of our energies are our own energies. We are both safe and protected, and the container of the reading is now closed. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure to get to connect with you. I could talk to you for 5 more hours. I hope you'll come back on because I feel like we have so much more to talk about.
I would love to.
And so please share, where can people find you? How can people support your work? We'll put it all in the show notes, but I know some people they process things auditorily. So where can people find you?
You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Fariha_Róisín. You can read and subscribe to my newsletter. It's fariharóisín.substack.com. You can read my books. I have 3 books out that you can buy: How to Cure a Ghost, Being in Your Body, which is a journal about body positivity, and also Like a Bird. They should be available everywhere. And then soon I'll have a pre-order link to my next book, Who Was Wellness For, which is really exciting. Yay! And I really, really hope that people pre-order it. It's the most important book I feel like I've ever written, which is crazy because Like a Bird and How to Cure Ghosts are so important. But what else? I think that's it. I have a really funny Tumblr.
I love that. Commitment. That's commitment. That's loyalty right there. That's devotion.
Exactly.
Love it. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. It was such a pleasure and an honor. And until soon.
Thank you, Sarah.
That's our show for this week. If you like this episode, let us know. Sign up for Fariha's newsletter, buy all her books, send her a kind message. Until very, very soon, everyone, be kind to yourself and to one another. Moonbeaming is brought to you by the Moon Studio. We are created and hosted by Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. Editing is by Caitlin George Parker, and the sound is by Will Owen. Thank you for your support. Witches in the autumn leaves, collecting things for jars. Witches